Have you ever been looked at like you were garbage by the person who promised to love you forever? I sat in that cold conference room, staring at the divorce papers my husband, Ethan, had just thrown across the mahogany table. He was laughing, holding the hand of his pregnant mistress, thinking he was kicking me out into the streets with nothing but the clothes on my back. He thought he had won. He thought he was the powerful one. But he didn't notice the older man in the grey work jumpsuit quietly watering the plants in the corner of the office. He didn't know that man wasn't a gardener. That was Silas Montgomery, the billionaire owner of the entire city block, and my father. And he had just seen everything. The air in the conference room of Hayes and Associates smelled like expensive leather and old money, but to Isabella it smelled like betrayal. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, her knuckles white. Across from her sat Ethan Caldwell, the man she had spent the last 5 years building a life with. He wasn't looking at her. He was checking his reflection in the dark screen of his phone, adjusting the knot of his silk tie, a tie Isabella had bought him for their anniversary 3 months ago, the anniversary he had missed because he was working late. Next to him sat Sophie, a 23-year-old marketing intern from Ethan's firm. She was chewing gum loudly, scrolling through Instagram, her other hand resting possessively on Ethan's forearm. She wore a diamond bracelet that Isabella recognized. It was the one missing from her jewelry box last week. "Let's wrap this up, Bella," Ethan said, finally looking up. His voice was bored, devoid of the warmth that used to make her heart race. "I have a reservation at Le Bernardin in an hour. Sophie's craving seafood." Isabella swallowed the lump in her throat. "You're taking her to our favorite restaurant?" Ethan scoffed, a cruel, sharp sound. "It was never our restaurant, Bella. It was a restaurant I paid for, just like I paid for the house, the car, and the clothes on your back. Let's be real. You were a charity case I picked up at that coffee shop. I tried to mold you into a CEO's wife, but, well, look at you." He gestured vaguely at her simple beige cardigan and jeans. He had always hated her modesty. He wanted a trophy, not a partner. "Just sign the papers," Sophie chimed in, popping a bubble. "Ethan needs to be free before the baby shower. It's bad PR to have a wife lurking around when we're launching the new tech line." Isabella looked down at the documents. Separation agreement. Total waiver of spousal support. Transfer of marital home to Ethan Caldwell. Petitioner retains all stocks and assets. It was a total washout. He was leaving her with absolutely nothing. "Ethan," Isabella said softly, "I supported you when you started Caldwell Tech. I worked 2 jobs so you could code in the garage. I introduced you to your first angel investor." "You introduced me to a guy you met at a diner," Ethan snapped, slamming his hand on the table. "Don't act like you have any business sense, Bella. You're a barista turned housewife. You were lucky to be along for the ride. But the ride is over. Sign it, or I'll drag this out in court until you can't afford a loaf of bread." In the corner of the room, a sliding glass door stood slightly ajar, leading to the terrace. Inside the room, near the bookshelf, an older man in a faded grey maintenance uniform was slowly wiping down the leaves of a large ficus plant. He wore a cap pulled low over his eyes and moved with a slow, methodical rhythm. Ethan had glanced at him once when they entered, sneering at the lawyer, Preston Hayes. "Since when do you let the help work during client meetings, Preston?" Preston Hayes, the high-powered attorney who usually charged $1,000 an hour, had looked unusually pale. He had stammered, He's just finishing up, Mr. Caldwell. Please, ignore him." Ethan had ignored him. Ethan ignored anyone he didn't think could benefit him. Isabella picked up the pen. Her hand wasn't shaking. A strange calm had settled over her. You really think money is everything, don't you, Ethan? She asked, her voice steady. It's the only thing that matters in this world, babe, Ethan smirked. And you have none of it. Sign. Isabella looked at the janitor in the corner. For a split second, the old man stopped wiping the leaf. He tilted his head slightly, just enough for Isabella to see the steel-grey eyes beneath the brim of the hat. Eyes that matched hers. She looked back at Ethan. Okay. She pressed the pen to the paper. The scratching sound of the nib was the only noise in the room. Isabella Montgomery Caldwell. Done, she whispered. Ethan snatched the papers away before the ink was even dry. He checked the signature, then grinned like a shark who smelled blood. Finally. God, I feel 10 pounds lighter. He turned to Sophie and kissed her, right there in front of Isabella. Let's go, babe. We've got a life to live. As they stood up, Ethan tossed a $20 bill onto the table toward Isabella. Take a cab, Bella. It's gonna rain. The ultimate insult. Ethan and Sophie strutted toward the door, laughing. But before they could touch the handle, a deep, gravelly voice echoed from the corner. I wouldn't open that door if I were you, son. Ethan froze. He turned around, annoyed. The janitor was standing up straight now. He took off the grey cap and tossed it onto the expensive leather chair. He unzipped the dirty work jumpsuit to reveal a bespoke Italian suit underneath, one that cost more than Ethan's car. Excuse me? Ethan snapped. Who the hell are you to speak to me? The old man walked forward. He didn't walk like a janitor anymore. He walked like a king entering his throne room. I believe you have my pen, the man said, pointing to the expensive fountain pen Ethan had pocketed after signing. I'm Ethan Caldwell, CEO of Caldwell Tech. Ethan spat. I could buy you and this entire building. The old man laughed. It was a terrifying, booming sound. Buy this building. Son, you're standing in Montgomery Tower. I built this building before you were born. And as for buying me... He turned to Isabella, his eyes softening. Hello, Peanut. Isabella stood up, tears finally spilling over. Hi, Daddy. Ethan's face went from red to ghost white in a single second. He looked from the old man to Isabella and back again. Daddy? But... She's poor. Her dad is a mechanic in Ohio. That's what she told you, the man said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. Because she wanted to see if you loved her, or the Montgomery billions. And congratulations, Ethan. You failed the test. The silence in the room was deafening. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to stop. Sophie dropped her phone. It hit the carpet with a dull thud. Montgomery, Ethan whispered, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. As in, Silas Montgomery, the Silas Montgomery, mining, real estate, aerospace. That would be me, Silas said, walking over to stand beside his daughter. He was a head taller than Ethan and twice as broad, despite being in his 60s. He radiated a power that made Ethan shrink. But this is impossible, Ethan stammered, backing away. I did a background check on her. Isabella Smith, from Dayton. Isabella Montgomery, Silas corrected. We have very good lawyers who know how to seal records, Ethan. When my daughter told me she met a young man with potential and wanted to date him without the burden of my name, I was skeptical. I told her men are greedy. I told her they would use her. Silas placed a heavy hand on Isabella's shoulder. But she believed in you. She said you had a good heart. So I let her go. I created the identity of Isabella Smith. I even set up that fake mechanic shop in Ohio you visited once for Christmas. Those mechanics were actors on my payroll. Ethan's knees actually buckled. He grabbed the back of a chair to steady himself. He remembered that Christmas. He had spent the whole time complaining about the smell of grease and the cheap beer. He had mocked Isabella's father for his dirty fingernails. I didn't know, Ethan choked out. Precisely, Silas said. You didn't know, and that is why we are here. You treated my daughter like a servant because you thought she had no value. You cheated on her because you thought she had no power, and you divorced her because you thought she had no money. Silas walked over to the table and picked up the divorce papers. He scanned them. You really screwed yourself here, Ethan, Silas said, shaking his head. Petitioner retains all stocks and assets. Waiver of spousal support. You were so desperate to keep your little tech startup money that you waived your right to marital assets. Ethan looked confused. Yeah? So? I keep my money. She gets nothing. That's the deal. Isabella spoke up then. Her voice was stronger now, bolstered by her father's presence. Ethan, do you remember the seed money for Caldwell Tech? The initial $2 million? Yeah, Ethan said defensively. It came from the angel investor. Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling works for me, Silas interrupted smoothly. He manages my private equity fund. That $2 million wasn't his. It was Isabella's. What? Ethan gasped. My wedding gift to you, Isabella said, her eyes sad but dry. I asked my father to fund your dream anonymously. I wanted you to feel like you did it on your own. But legally? That investment was made through a shell corporation solely owned by me. Silas grinned, showing teeth. And since you just signed a document stating that you keep your assets and she keeps hers, and since that investment contract has a strict change of control clause triggered by divorce, Silas turned to the lawyer, Preston Hayes. Preston, what does the contract say? Preston Hayes, who had been sweating profusely, opened a file folder. Yes, Mr. Montgomery. The contract states that in the event of a dissolution of marriage between the beneficiary, Ethan Caldwell, and the primary investor's proxy, Isabella, the initial capital, plus 80% of all subsequent valuation, reverts to the primary investor. Ethan felt like he was having a stroke. 80%. Caldwell Tech is valued at $40 million, Sophie squeaked, her voice trembling. So, Silas did the math in the air. $32 million of that now belongs to Isabella. You own the remaining 20%, which, after I'm done burying your company in lawsuits and blocking your supply chains, will be worth roughly $0. Ethan lunged forward. You can't do that. I built that company. I wrote the code. Two large men in dark suits instantly appeared from the hallway, blocking Ethan's path. Silas's security detail. They had been waiting outside the whole time. You wrote the code, Isabella said, stepping forward. But I cooked your meals. I washed your clothes. I managed your schedule. I calmed you down when you had panic attacks. And I funded the entire operation. You didn't build it, Ethan. We built it. And you just fired your partner. Ethan looked at the papers on the table, the papers he had been so eager to sign. He reached for them, desperate to tear them up. No, I rescind. I didn't mean it. Bella, baby, please, it's a mistake. I was stressed. Sophie meant nothing. Sophie gasped. Ethan! Shut up, Ethan screamed at her. You ruined everything. He looked back at Isabella, his eyes wide and manic. Bella, please. I love you. You know I love you. We can fix this. Your dad. We can be a family. Think of the power we could have. Isabella looked at him with pure pity. It was worse than hate. I'm thinking of the power, Ethan, she said. The power to walk away. She turned to her father. I'm ready to go, Dad. Car's waiting downstairs, sweetheart, Silas said gently. We're going to Paris. You need a vacation. Wait! Ethan screamed as the security guard stepped forward to usher him out. "What about me? Where am I supposed to go? You took my house." Silas paused at the door. He looked back over his shoulder. "Actually, the house is in Isabella's name, too. I bought it through a trust. You were just paying rent." Silas chuckled. "But I'm a generous man. I won't leave you homeless." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the $20 bill Ethan had thrown at Isabella earlier. He crumpled it into a ball and tossed it at Ethan's feet. "Take a cab, Ethan. It's going to rain." Rain was falling in sheets by the time Ethan Caldwell stumbled out of the revolving doors of Montgomery Tower. He was drenched within seconds, his Italian suit clinging to his skin like a second, cold layer of shame. He looked around for his car, a sleek black Porsche Panamera, usually parked right in the front VIP spot. It was gone. In its place stood a tow truck, its amber lights flashing against the grey sky. "Hey!" Ethan sprinted toward the driver, splashing through a puddle that ruined his loafers. "Hey, that's my car! Put it down!" The driver, a burly man with a thick beard, didn't even roll down the window. He just pointed to a clipboard, and then to the tow-away zone sign that had definitely not been there this morning. "This is a mistake," Ethan screamed, banging on the glass. "I'm the CEO of Caldwell Tech. I own this spot." The driver finally cracked the window an inch. "Repo order, buddy. Bank called it in 10 minutes ago. Missed payments." "Missed payments?" Ethan spluttered. "I have autopay. I have millions." "Take it up with the bank." The driver revved the engine and pulled away, dragging the last symbol of Ethan's status into the rainy traffic of Manhattan. Sophie was standing under the awning of the building, shivering, her arms crossed over her chest. She watched the car disappear, then looked at Ethan with a mixture of horror and disgust. "Ethan," she said, her voice shrill. "Where is the car? How are we getting to Le Bernardin?" Ethan whipped around, his hair plastered to his forehead. "Forget the damn restaurant, Sophie. Didn't you hear what happened up there? Silas Montgomery just froze my assets. He's trying to scare me." "He seemed pretty serious, Ethan," Sophie said, taking a step back. She pulled out her phone. "My friend in HR just texted me. She said security is escorting everyone out of the Caldwell Tech offices on the 14th floor. They're changing the locks." "They can't do that," Ethan roared, causing a passing businessman to flinch. "I am the founder." "Ethan," Sophie said, looking at her phone screen, her face pale. "Read TMZ." Ethan snatched the phone from her hand. "Breaking news. Billionaire heiress dumps tech fraud. Isabella Montgomery, daughter of tycoon Silas Montgomery, files for divorce from Ethan Caldwell. Sources say Caldwell was caught embezzling funds from his wife's private accounts to fund a lavish lifestyle for his mistress. Caldwell Tech shares plummet 40% in after-hours trading." "Embezzling?" Ethan shrieked. "I never embezzled. I used our joint account." "You told me you were rich," Sophie yelled, snatching her phone back. "You told me she was a nobody. You said you paid for everything. I will be rich again. It's just a setback. I'll sue him. I'll sue them all." Ethan reached for her hand. "Sophie, baby, we just need to go back to the penthouse. We'll regroup. I have cash in the safe." Sophie pulled her hand away, as if he were contagious. She looked at him, wet, pathetic, broke, and visibly terrified. The power he had exuded an hour ago was gone, replaced by the desperate stench of failure. "The penthouse?" Sophie let out a dry, cruel laugh. "You mean her penthouse? Ethan, you're done. You're radioactive. If I stay with you, I'll never work in this city again. Silas Montgomery will blackball anyone who even breathes in your direction." She hailed a passing yellow cab. "Sophie, you're pregnant with my child," Ethan cried out, stepping toward her. Sophie opened the cab door. She looked back one last time, her eyes cold. "Actually, I'm not. I just needed you to sign the lease on that condo for me. But I guess that's not happening now." She slammed the door. The cab sped off, splashing muddy water all over Ethan's legs. He stood alone on the sidewalk. He had no car, no wife, no mistress, no company. And as he reached into his pocket to call an Uber, he realized he had left his phone on the conference table upstairs. He had nothing but a crumpled $20 bill in the mud at his feet. 6 hours later, across the Atlantic Ocean, a private Gulfstream G650 jet began its descent into Paris, Le Bourget Airport. Isabella sat in a plush, cream-colored leather seat, wrapped in a cashmere blanket. Her eyes were red and swollen, but the tears had stopped. Across from her, Silas was reading a newspaper, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He had given her space for the entire flight, only speaking to offer her water or food. "We're landing, Peanut," he said softly, folding the paper. Isabella looked out the window at the glittering lights of Paris. It was a city of romance, but right now, it just looked like a place to hide. "Did you really take everything from him, Dad?" she asked, her voice raspy. Silas took off his glasses and sighed. "I didn't take anything that wasn't yours, Isabella. He took your love, your trust, and your youth. I simply balanced the ledger." "He's going to fight," she said. "Ethan doesn't know how to lose." "Ethan is a child playing with fire," Silas said dismissively. "He doesn't realize he's standing in a furnace. By tomorrow morning, every lawyer in New York will have received a memo reminding them that representing Ethan Caldwell is a conflict of interest with Montgomery Enterprises. He won't find a decent attorney within 1,000 miles. Isabella shivered. She knew her father was ruthless in business, but she had never been on the receiving end of his protection before. It was terrifying and comforting all at once. "What do I do now?" she whispered. "I don't know who I am anymore. I've been Ethan's wife for 5 years. Before that, I was Isabella Smith. Who is Isabella Montgomery?" Silas reached across the aisle and took her hand. His grip was warm and calloused. "That," he said, "is exactly why we are here. You aren't going to be just my daughter, and you certainly aren't going to be his ex-wife. You're going to be the CEO of the Montgomery Foundation's European division." Isabella's eyes widened. "Me? Dad, I ran a coffee shop. I managed Ethan's schedule. I'm not a CEO. You have a degree in art history and economics that you never used because that idiot wanted you to stay in the kitchen," Silas said firmly. "You have my blood. You have my brain. You just need to remember how to use it. Tomorrow, you rest. But on Monday, we go to work." The plane touched down with a gentle bump. As they taxied to the private hangar, Isabella saw a line of black cars waiting. "One more thing," Silas said, as the cabin crew opened the door. "I've assigned a new chief of staff to help you get settled. He's based here in Paris. He's young, but he's the best logistical mind I have. Trust him." Isabella nodded wearily. She didn't want a handler. She just wanted to sleep for a year. She walked down the stairs of the jet, into the cool night air. A tall man in a dark navy suit was standing at the bottom of the stairs, holding an umbrella to shield her from the light drizzle. He wasn't like the security guards. He was leaner, with sharp cheekbones and messy dark hair that curled slightly at the collar. He didn't look like a subordinate. He looked capable. "Ms. Montgomery," he said. His voice was deep, with a faint, refined British accent. He held the umbrella steady, not wavering even as the wind picked up. "Welcome to Paris. I'm Gabriel. Gabriel Hunt." Isabella looked up at him. He had kind eyes, not the predatory, hungry eyes Ethan had. Just clear, hazel eyes that looked at her with a quiet respect. "Hi," she breathed. "I have the car heated to 22 degrees, and I took the liberty of ordering chamomile tea to be waiting at the residence," Gabriel said, guiding her toward the lead car. "Your father mentioned you've had a long day." "A long life," Isabella corrected. Gabriel offered a small, sad smile. "Then let's start with a short night. Tomorrow is a new day." 2 months had passed since the divorce papers were signed. Paris in the spring was usually a cliché of blooming flowers and lovers walking along the Seine, but for Isabella, it had been a boot camp. Silas hadn't been joking. He had thrown her into the deep end of the Montgomery Foundation, a massive charitable organization that managed billions in assets for art preservation and orphanages across Europe. Isabella was tired, but for the first time in years, she felt useful. She sat in her office overlooking the Eiffel Tower, reviewing the budget for the upcoming Lumiere Gala. It was the biggest social event of the season, and it was her official coming out to European society as Isabella Montgomery. "You're frowning," a voice came from the doorway. Isabella looked up. Gabriel Hunt was leaning against the doorframe, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. Over the last 8 weeks, Gabriel had become her shadow. He managed her schedule, screened her calls, and more importantly, he actually listened to her. "I'm not frowning," Isabella said, taking the coffee he offered. "I'm concentrating. The caterer is trying to charge us triple for the champagne because they know it's a Montgomery event." "I handled it," Gabriel said, sitting in the chair opposite her. He stretched his long legs out. "I reminded them that we own the building their warehouse is in." Suddenly they found a discount. Isabella smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that reached her eyes. "You're dangerous, Gabriel." "I'm efficient," he corrected. "There's a difference." He watched her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Are you ready for tonight? The press will be there. They're still hungry for the divorce of the century scoop." Isabella's smile faded. She swirled the coffee in her cup. "I'm terrified. Everyone is going to be looking at me, wondering what was wrong with me, why he left me." "They won't be thinking that," Gabriel said softly. "How do you know?" "Because." Gabriel leaned forward, his voice dropping an octave, intense and sincere. "I've seen how you work. I've seen how you treat the staff. I've seen you memorize the names of the donors' children. You have a grace that Ethan Caldwell couldn't understand because he lacks a soul. If people stare tonight, Isabella, it's because they're wondering how any man could be stupid enough to let you go." Isabella felt a blush rise up her neck. It wasn't just the compliment, it was the way he said it. With Ethan, compliments were always transactional. "You look good, so I look good." With Gabriel, it felt like an observation of fact. "Thank you, Gabriel," she whispered. "Just doing my job, boss," he said, standing up abruptly, as if he realized he had crossed a line. "The car will be downstairs at 7. Wear the red dress." "The red one? It's a bit bold." Gabriel paused at the door. "You're a Montgomery. Be bold." Meanwhile, in a cramped studio apartment in Queens, New York, Ethan Caldwell was screaming into his phone. "What do you mean you can't publish it?" he yelled, pacing the room. The floor was covered in takeout boxes and unpaid bills. "I mean, Mr. Caldwell," the editor of the gossip rag. The Daily Whisper sighed. "That every time we try to run your story about Isabella being a manipulative liar, we get a cease and desist letter from a law firm that charges more per hour than our entire operating budget. We can't touch it." "She lied about her identity," Ethan argued. That's fraud. The public needs to know she entrapped me. Look, unless you have proof, like hard video evidence of her plotting or something, we can't help you. Silas Montgomery has effectively embargoed your name in the press. You're ghosted, man. Give it up." The line went dead. Ethan threw the phone against the wall. It cracked, but didn't break. He sank onto the dirty mattress. He had been reduced to this. No job, no friends. His credit cards were frozen. He was surviving on the cash he had managed to pawn from his watches before Silas's team seized them. He opened his laptop, an old model, not the top-tier tech he was used to. He pulled up the live stream of the Lumiere Gala in Paris. And there she was, Isabella. She stepped out of a black limousine, and the flashbulbs went off like a supernova. She was wearing a crimson gown that hugged her figure, with diamonds dripping from her ears. She looked regal, untouchable. And next to her, guiding her hand with a protective ease, was a man Ethan didn't recognize. Tall, dark-haired, handsome in a way that wasn't flashy. He whispered something in her ear, and Isabella threw her head back and laughed. It was a real laugh. Ethan hadn't heard that laugh in 3 years. Rage, hot and blinding, surged through Ethan's veins. She was happy. She was thriving, while he was rotting in Queens. "Who is that guy?" Ethan muttered, zooming in on the screen. He took a screenshot of Gabriel's face. He began to type furiously, searching the facial recognition databases he still had access to via a back door in the Caldwell Tech server. Access he wasn't supposed to have, but he had built the system after all. Searching. No matches in public celebrity databases. Searching. Corporate registries. Ping. Gabriel Hunt. Former British SAS intelligence. Law degree from Oxford. Current head of security and operations for Montgomery European Holdings. Ethan stared at the screen. A bodyguard? A lawyer? Then he saw a sub-file. A sealed record. Ethan used his old admin override codes to crack it. It took 10 minutes, but the file opened. It was a medical report from 3 years ago. Gabriel Hunt, discharged from active duty. Reason: severe injury during hostage extraction. Ethan scanned the document and found what he was looking for. A weakness. A secret. "So you're not perfect, are you, Gabriel?" Ethan whispered, a plan forming in his desperate, twisted mind. "You're a damaged soldier playing dress-up." Ethan grabbed his phone. If the newspapers wouldn't print his story, maybe he didn't need the newspapers. He still had his Twitter account, and he still had 500,000 followers who didn't know the whole truth yet. He started typing a thread. He wasn't just going to attack Isabella anymore. He was going to attack her new protector. He was going to burn the whole thing down. The gala was a triumph. Isabella had navigated the shark tank of high society without a single stumble. She had secured €3 million in donations for the Art Restoration Fund in a single night. Now she was on the balcony of the venue, looking out over the Seine. The noise of the party was muffled behind the glass doors. "You survived," Gabriel said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of champagne. "I did," Isabella exhaled, taking a sip. "I actually enjoyed it. Is that strange? I used to hate these things with Ethan. He always made me feel like I was an accessory. Tonight, I felt like the driver." "You were the engine," Gabriel said. He clinked his glass against hers. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," she echoed. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. The chemistry between them was palpable now, a low hum of electricity. Isabella turned to look at him. The moonlight softened the sharp angles of his face. "Gabriel," she started, "why do you work for my father? You have a law degree from Oxford. You could be a partner at any firm. Why be a fixer?" Gabriel looked away, his jaw tightening. Your father gave me a purpose when I didn't have one. After the military, I was lost, angry. He saw potential where others saw a liability. A liability? Isabella reached out and touched his arm. I don't see a liability. Gabriel looked down at her hand, then up into her eyes. The intensity there took her breath away. He started to lean in, just an inch. Isabella's heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted him to kiss her. She wanted to erase every memory of Ethan's cold lips with Gabriel's warmth. Suddenly, the glass door burst open. It was Silas. He looked furious. He had a tablet in his hand. "Dad?" Isabella pulled away from Gabriel, startled. "What's wrong?" "We have a problem," Silas growled. "Ethan, he's gone rogue." He shoved the tablet into Isabella's hands. It was a Twitter thread. It was trending worldwide. The real Isabella. Now Ethan Caldwell. Everyone sees the glitz in Paris, but no one knows the truth. Isabella Montgomery is a fraud who hid her billions to trap me, then destroyed my company when I tried to leave an abusive marriage. And now, she's running around with a violent ex-mercenary. Meet Gabriel Hunt, a man discharged for unstable conduct after a mission went wrong. Is this who you want running charities? A liar and a killer? Below the text were photos. Photos of Isabella looking disheveled during their divorce argument, clearly taken by Sophie. Photos of Gabriel's military records that were supposed to be sealed. And worst of all, a doctored video clip of Isabella yelling at Ethan, edited to make her look deranged. "He hacked the servers," Gabriel said, his voice ice-cold as he read over her shoulder. "He accessed my personnel files." "I'm going to kill him," Silas roared. "I will bury him so deep the devil won't find him." Isabella stared at the screen. The comments were pouring in. "Wow, rich girls are crazy. Justice for Ethan. She looks evil." She felt the familiar panic rising, the shame, the desire to hide. She looked at Gabriel. He looked devastated. Not for himself, but for her. He had been exposed, his trauma weaponized to hurt her. "Isabella," Gabriel said, stepping back. "I should go. My presence is hurting your reputation. I'll resign effectively immediately." "No," Isabella said. The word came out quiet but firm. "No," she said louder. She looked up from the tablet. Her eyes were dry. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She was done crying. She was done running. "Dad," Isabella said, turning to Silas. "Call the jet." Silas blinked. "We're going back to New York?" "No," Isabella said. "We're staying right here. But I want you to set up a press conference. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Live stream." "Isabella, you don't have to do this," Silas said. "I can handle it. I can scrub the internet." "You can't scrub the truth, Dad, and I'm tired of people speaking for me. Ethan wants a show? I'll give him a show." She turned to Gabriel. She walked right up to him and grabbed the lapels of his jacket, forcing him to look at her. "And you are not resigning," she said fiercely. "You didn't do anything wrong. You served your country, and you saved lives. Ethan is trying to shame you for your scars. Well, I have scars too, and I'm not hiding them anymore." Gabriel looked at her, stunned. He saw the fire in her eyes, the fire of a woman who had walked through hell and come out holding a torch. "I need you by my side tomorrow, Gabriel," she said. "Not as my employee, as my partner. Can you do that?" Gabriel slowly covered her hands with his own. "I would walk into fire for you, Isabella." "Good," she said, turning back to the Paris skyline. "Because tomorrow we're going to burn Ethan Caldwell to the ground." The grand ballroom of the Hotel Ritz Paris was packed to capacity. Hundreds of journalists from CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, and every major tech blog were jostling for position. The air crackled with anticipation. The hashtag the real Isabella was still trending, but the sentiment was shifting from mockery to curiosity. Everyone wanted to see the billionaire heiress who had allegedly destroyed her husband. In Queens, Ethan sat on his mattress, his laptop propped up on a stack of pizza boxes. He was grinning. "Go ahead, princess," he muttered at the screen. "Try to talk your way out of this. You can't deny the military records. You can't deny you lied about your name." On the screen, the curtains parted. Silas Montgomery walked out first. He didn't take the podium. He simply stood to the side, arms crossed, a silent sentinel. Then Isabella walked out. She wasn't wearing a power suit. She was wearing a simple white dress, clean and unadorned. She looked vulnerable, yet incredibly strong, and walking right beside her, holding her hand firmly in front of the entire world, was Gabriel. The cameras flashed like lightning. Isabella stepped up to the microphone. She didn't have any notes. "Yesterday," she began, her voice clear and steady, "my ex-husband, Ethan Caldwell, accused me of being a fraud. He told the world that I hid my identity to entrap him. He accused the man standing next to me of being unstable." She paused, looking directly into the camera lens. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine in his Queens apartment. It felt like she was looking right at him. "Ethan is right about one thing," Isabella said. "I did hide my identity. But I didn't do it to trap him. I did it to protect myself. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for what my father owns. And for 5 years, I thought I had found that love. I was wrong." She gestured to the screen behind her. A document appeared. It was the divorce settlement Ethan had signed. "Ethan claims I stole his company. The truth is, I funded it. And when he decided to discard me for a younger woman, when he threw me out of his office and mocked my poverty, he signed this document. He chose money over loyalty. He just didn't realize the money he was choosing was mine." The room was silent. "But the most shameful thing," Isabella continued, her voice hardening, "is his attack on Gabriel Hunt." She turned to Gabriel. Gabriel was discharged from the SAS because he took shrapnel protecting a school bus of children during a humanitarian escort mission. The instability Ethan cites in the leaked file, it was a diagnosis of PTSD, which he has managed with courage and dignity. Gabriel is a hero. Ethan Caldwell is a man who hacks private servers to weaponize a soldier's trauma because he is too weak to fight his own battles. The journalists began typing furiously. The narrative was flipping in real time. "But Ethan," Isabella said, leaning into the mic, "you didn't just hack Gabriel's medical records. You left a digital footprint, and you forgot something very important about my father." Silas stepped forward, a predatory smile on his face. He leaned into the mic. "I own the servers you hacked, son." Isabella nodded. "While you were busy tweeting last night, our cybersecurity team was tracking your connection. We found the back door you used. And while we were in there, we found something else." A new document flashed on the screen behind them. It was a bank transfer log. "This," Isabella said, "is a record of $5 million funneled from Caldwell Tech's R&D budget into a shell company in the Cayman Islands, a shell company registered to Ethan Caldwell." Ethan froze. His heart stopped. That was the retirement fund he had skimmed off the top last year. He thought he had hidden it deep in the code. "Embezzlement," Isabella stated. "Corporate espionage, violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, and blackmail." She looked at the camera again, her eyes cold as steel. "We handed this evidence to the FBI and the NYPD 3 hours ago. They tell me they are executing the warrant right about now." On Ethan's screen, he saw Isabella look off camera. Then he heard a sound in his own apartment, a heavy, booming pounding on his door. "Police! Open up!" Ethan scrambled backward, tripping over the pizza boxes. No. Crash. The door to his studio apartment splintered open. A SWAT team poured into the tiny room. "Ethan Caldwell, hands in the air." Ethan raised his trembling hands. He looked at the laptop screen one last time. Isabella was still watching him, calm and victorious. "It's over, Ethan," she said on the screen, as if she could see the police tackling him. One of the officers noticed the laptop. He walked over and slammed the lid shut. The screen went black. 1 year later, the fluorescent lights of the recreational room at the Otis Bantam Correctional Center buzzed with a headache-inducing hum. It was a far cry from the ambient lighting of the executive suites Ethan Caldwell was used to. He sat at a scratched metal table, staring at a lukewarm cup of instant coffee that tasted like dishwater. He wasn't Ethan Caldwell, the tech visionary, anymore. He was inmate 729. "Hey, Caldwell," a voice grunted from the other side of the room. "Your wife is on TV again." Ethan flinched. He didn't look up. He knew who they were talking about. For the first 3 months of his sentence, he had obsessively watched every news segment, torturing himself. Now, it was just background noise to his misery. On the wall-mounted television, encased in protective plexiglass, the morning news was broadcasting a special report. The chyron read, "Phoenix Rising, How Isabella Montgomery Redefined Venture Capital." The anchor's voice drifted over the noise of the prison block. It has been exactly 1 year since the collapse of Caldwell Tech, a scandal that rocked Silicon Valley. But from the ashes, Isabella Montgomery has built something far more impressive. Her firm, Phoenix Ventures, has just posted a first-quarter profit that rivals the GDP of a small country. But unlike her predecessor, she's doing it by funding ethical startups and female-led enterprises. Ethan finally glanced up. There she was. She was walking out of the New York Stock Exchange, having just rung the opening bell. She looked radiant, powerful, and completely unreachable. She didn't look like the woman who used to nervously ask him if he liked dinner. She looked like a titan. And she wasn't alone. Walking a step behind her, guiding her through the crowd with a hand on the small of her back, was Gabriel Hunt. He looked sharp in a charcoal suit, his eyes scanning the crowd with that protective intensity Ethan had once mocked. Ethan looked down at his orange jumpsuit. He had signed a plea deal for 10 years for embezzlement and corporate espionage. With good behavior, he might get out in 5. But the world moved fast. In 5 years, he would be a dinosaur, an ancient, bankrupt relic. He realized then, with a crushing weight in his chest, that he hadn't just lost his money. He had lost the only person who had ever actually loved him. Manhattan, however, was bathed in the golden light of late spring. In the penthouse suite of the Montgomery building, a space Isabella had completely renovated to remove any trace of the old money stuffiness, the air smelled of fresh espresso and peonies. Isabella sat on the limestone terrace, reviewing a portfolio on her tablet. She was dressed in a soft silk robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. She wasn't rushing. One of the luxuries she had reclaimed was time. "You're frowning at the screen," a deep voice noted. Isabella looked up to see Gabriel stepping out onto the terrace. He was holding 2 mugs, steam curling into the morning air. He looked relaxed, younger than he had a year ago. The shadows that had haunted his eyes when they first met in Paris had lifted, replaced by a quiet contentment. "I'm not frowning," Isabella said, taking the mug he offered. "I'm just, amazed. We just acquired the tech firm that Sophie tried to get a job at." Gabriel chuckled, sitting down on the lounge chair opposite her. Let me guess. You're going to be a benevolent overlord? Actually, I'm keeping the staff, Isabella said, taking a sip of the coffee. It was perfect. Hazelnut, just how she liked it. Gabriel always remembered. But Sophie, I heard she moved back to Nebraska 6 months ago. Retail management, I think. The Gap, Gabriel corrected effortlessly. Assistant manager. She's doing fine. She's living the life she can afford. Isabella shook her head. It feels like a different lifetime, Gabriel. Sometimes I wake up and I expect to be back in that cold conference room with Ethan laughing at me. I expect to feel small again. Gabriel reached across the small table and took her hand. His grip was warm, grounding her in the present. You were never small, Isabella. You were just standing next to someone who refused to let you grow. Look at what you've done in 12 months. Phoenix Ventures isn't just a fund. It's a movement. You stepped out of the background. I had help, she whispered, squeezing his hand. I had a partner. You had a grunt, Gabriel teased gently. I just carried the bags and scared off the bad guys. You did a lot more than that, she said seriously. You reminded me that I was worth protecting. Before Gabriel could respond, the glass doors slid open with a dramatic whoosh. Silas Montgomery strode onto the terrace. He was wearing a tuxedo, complete with a bow tie, despite it being 10 o'clock in the morning. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery, or perhaps bought the lottery commission. Dad? Isabella laughed, putting her coffee down. Why are you dressed like Bond? It's breakfast. Preparation, Peanut. Preparation, Silas said, checking his vintage Rolex. I have a lunch date. The Duchess of York is in town for the UN summit, and she has agreed to let me buy her an overpriced salad. Isabella's jaw dropped. The Duchess? Dad, are you dating? Silas winked, a sparkle in his steel-grey eyes. Your mother has been gone a long time, Bella. She wouldn't want me to be a monk forever. Besides, I need a distraction. You're running the empire better than I ever did. I'm feeling obsolete. He walked over to the railing and looked out at the city he had helped build. I watched the news this morning, Bella. The segment on you. They called you a visionary. He turned back to her, his expression softening into pure pride. They finally see you. Not as my daughter. Not as Caldwell's wife. But as you. Thank you, Dad, Isabella said, her throat tight. Silas cleared his throat, pushing away the sentimental moment. He turned to Gabriel. Hunt, you're off the clock today. Gabriel raised an eyebrow. Sir, I said you're off the clock. No security detail. No driving. I have my own team for the Duchess. You... Silas gestured vaguely between Gabriel and Isabella. You two have things to discuss. Don't waste time. I'm an old man, and I want grandchildren before I'm too senile to spoil them. With that, Silas Montgomery turned on his heel and marched back inside, whistling a Frank Sinatra tune. Isabella buried her face in her hands, laughing. I can't believe him. Grandchildren. He has a point about wasting time, Gabriel said. His voice had changed. The playful tone was gone, replaced by a nervous gravity. Isabella looked up. Gabriel was standing now. He wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at her, with an intensity that made her heart hammer against her ribs. Gabriel. Isabella, he began, taking a step closer. He shoved his hands into his pockets, then pulled them out again. The man who had faced down armed insurgents and hostile corporate takeovers looked terrified. For the last year, I've defined myself by my job. My job was to keep you safe, to keep you happy, to be the wall between you and the world. And you were, she said softly. But I don't want that job anymore, Gabriel said. Isabella felt a cold spike of fear. You're resigning. "I'm resigning as your chief of staff," Gabriel said. He slowly lowered himself onto one knee. Isabella gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Gabriel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it. Inside sat a ring that Isabella recognized instantly. It wasn't a modern, flashy diamond like the one Ethan had bought to show off his own status. It was a vintage sapphire, deep blue like the ocean, surrounded by a halo of small, antique diamonds. "This was your mother's," Gabriel said quietly. "Silas gave it to me last night. He told me that she wore it for 30 years of happiness. He told me he's never trusted anyone with it. Until me." Tears spilled over Isabella's cheeks. "Gabriel." "Isabella," he continued, his voice steady now. "I don't want to work for you. I want to build with you. I want to be the one who makes you coffee in the morning and the last one you talk to at night. I don't want to stand in the background anymore. I want to stand right beside you. Will you marry me?" Isabella looked at the ring, then up at the man who had seen her at her lowest and treated her like she was the highest. She thought of Ethan, who had wanted a trophy. Gabriel wanted a partner. "Yes," she whispered, choked with emotion. Then, louder, "Yes, yes, Gabriel." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her hand all along. Gabriel stood up and pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply. It wasn't a kiss for the cameras. It wasn't a performance. It was a promise. Below them, the city of New York bustled with millions of people chasing power, money, and fame. But high above the noise, on a sun-drenched terrace, Isabella Montgomery had found the only thing that really mattered. She had found her truth. She had signed the papers. She had walked through the fire. And now, she was finally, truly free. And there you have it, the complete saga of Isabella Montgomery. From being humiliated in a cold conference room to building her own empire and finding true love, Isabella proved that the best revenge isn't anger, it's success. She stopped letting people put her in the background and finally stepped into her own light. Meanwhile, Ethan learned that when you trade loyalty for greed, you end up with nothing. I really hope you enjoyed this roller coaster of a story. If this ending satisfied your craving for justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. What was your favorite part? Was it Silas revealing his identity, the courtroom takedown, or the romantic proposal at the end? Let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.